Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. It's my first trip to Manchester. I'm excited to be here. I know I'm the last person standing between you and drinks, so let's go through the slides really quickly. All right. Was that too fast? This is a great thing about DuckSet. So this is a talk about creating great products with Agile development methodologies. Whether you're creating websites for your clients, products for extensions that you're developing for Magento, I still consider it product development. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about Scrum. How many people here are familiar with Scrum or practice Scrum currently? Great. The key Scrum team players are the product owner, who's the visionary and the strategist and drives the product. The Scrum Master is the facilitator who manages the information exchange. And then we have the team, who is a self-organizing group of developers, testers, designers. Some of the core principles of Scrum: we have a backlog of user stories. We have sprints, which our user stories are organized into, and our sprints can be 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks long. We have sprint planning meetings at the beginning of each sprint, where we choose which user stories we're going to be working on. And we have daily Scrum meetings, which are usually 15-minute stand-up meetings every day. And lastly, you'll have a retrospective meeting at the end of a sprint to talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and how you can improve it. For Scrum user stories, they're action stories for the software user that describe the type of user, what they want, and why. You can see here also I have a traditional Scrum board, which is a whiteboard where user stories are written on stickies and placed in swim lanes from to do and in progress and done. Well, now we have the internet, so we mostly use tools. Some of the most popular tools for Scrum and Agile are Jira and Assembler. I'm a big fan of both of them. And this is just an example of some of the great reports that you can get out of using these tools versus using a whiteboard. Some of the reporting that's really important in Scrum is the velocity report. This helps you to know how much time your team completed in hours or story points for a sprint. So let's talk a little bit about story points versus hours. We all know what hours are, right? But what are story points? It's kind of a mythical thing. And it's something that you and your team have to decide upon. You have to agree what one story point equals. Does that equal 2 hours? Does 3 story points equal a day? It has to be agreed upon measure that you guys all agree on. Your team can work in either story points or hours. And then the next report we have is the Burndown Report. This is how much has been burned down per sprint and how much is left to complete the product. So you can see here, for each sprint, how much time was completed, and that we're going to be completing it in sprint 6. A lot of people think that when you're doing Scrum and Agile, because you're doing sprints, you never know when it's going to end. And that's totally not the case if you're doing it correctly. If you're using your reports, you can always estimate the end date. But let's talk about being Agile. And I know some people say Agile, and I'm saying Agile. I don't know which one is the correct one, but we all want to be able to move fast and quickly, like those sea otters. I think it's really more about doing what works for your team. So adapting the principles of Scrum that work for you, and maybe adding things, taking things away, but being Agile is taking and doing what works for your team. So on our Agile team, we have a product manager, who is the product owner. We have a tech lead, who's the Scrum Master, because having a title of Scrum Master is just too cool. Nobody has that title. And then, of course, we have the team, who's still the self-organizing group of developers and testers and designers. Some of the key methodologies, we have the backlog of carefully pruned tickets with estimates. We have sprints, which are tickets to be worked on, and we do the daily, the weekly sprint planning meeting. Doing a daily stand-up meeting, I think it's really a question of whether that works for your team. Maybe it works to do it Tuesdays and Thursdays. Maybe you just do it Wednesday, or maybe you want to do it daily. It's what works for you guys. Let's talk a little bit about tickets versus user stories. I'm not a big fan of user stories because I think trying to communicate in the terms of like a user can view the homepage as designed is just more confusing than having an action summary of your ticket style the homepage. I think that makes a lot more sense to developers. Let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a ticket. In a ticket, we have a summary, which was the example I just gave, a description, which is one of the most important parts. It has to have all of the requirements for that ticket, and attachments, again, an important part. We're all doing web development. There's an interface or screenshot or a wireframe or a design that can be attached to a ticket. And we have an estimate. All your tickets should be estimated at all times. And I'm a firm believer of creating all the tickets for a release at the beginning, again, with estimates. You might say that sounds like a waterfall approach, but I'm not talking about all of the tickets for an entire project or an entire product. I'm talking about for one release. And I think it's really important for the whole team to be able to see the full picture and to know what they're going to be working, what all the tickets are when they're choosing tickets to work on for a sprint. What's the ticket workflow? This is an example from Jira, from a custom workflow that I created. So first, the ticket is in to-do. When you select, a developer selects it for development, it goes to in progress. And when they completed with it, it goes to dev complete. And then it can go to test and either be reopened to go back to in progress, or it can go to ready for development and done. This is the same process that we use for building new products, for building client websites, and for maintenance. Sometimes I feel like ready for development, we don't need that when we're building a new product, but we want to follow the same process for all of our projects. This is a process that our team agreed on. The sprint planning meeting is the most important meeting. It's really important to have the team buy into what's going to be worked on. So every Monday morning, we start by closing the prior sprint. We talk about the prior sprint, so we don't have a separate retrospective meeting. We just talk about what got done really quickly. If there was any problems. There's never any problems. And then we create a new sprint. So the team will then pick the tickets that are going to be worked on, and they pick them in priority order. So it's the product owner's job before this happens to make sure that the tickets are organized, pruned, and in priority order. All the tickets have to be estimated. So if the ticket doesn't have an estimate at that time, you can estimate it in the meeting. And I'll talk more about estimates in a little bit. And you pick your tickets with a total time equal to your velocity. So we talked a little bit about the velocity reports. So you can know your team's velocity by looking at that report and seeing, oh, we completed 96 hours last week, so now this week we can choose 96 hours. We tend to use weekly sprints for new products. I have a quick case study here. It's a really simplistic project. It's called Laces. It's a sneaker store. And they want to have, these are their requirements. They want to have a modern look and feel, so they have a home, category, product, and checkout. And they want to have a shoe customizer that's going to allow users to select colors of a shoe, trim, and laces, and allow users to upload the logo of a shoe. These just simplistic requirements here. So then the tickets that we would be creating based on those requirements, first we'd create an epic for theming. And in Jira, you can create epics that stand on top of your tickets and organize them. You can organize things by feature or, like I have, by area. Since this project had like 2 separate areas of theming and backend, and we had different teams working on them, it made more sense to organize them this way. This is what the Giro Board looks like for laces. On the bottom here, we have the backlog. So those are the tickets that haven't been chosen yet. And then on the top, we have Sprint 2, and those are the tickets that we chose in our sprint planning meeting to get started with. You can also see in the color coding on the side next to my photo, why are all the tickets assigned to me? You can easily see the epics that they're assigned to, and they're color coded so that you can quickly see, the different areas. This is what our Scrum Board looks like. So we have swim lanes, columns for each of the ticket processes. At any time, we can quickly look at this board and know what's going on. I don't have to have a daily stand-up with my developers to ask them, what are you doing today? Because I can open up this Giro board and I can see what's in progress. Or I can see if they've moved something back to do because it got reopened, or if there's something ready to be tested. Ideally, at the end of the sprint, all of our tickets are going to be done. One of the big questions we always kind of struggled with is moving from one sprint to the next, and the whole thing of the definition of done. Everybody wants to finish their tickets in their sprint, and they don't want to be blamed for not being done. Well, what do you do with tickets from the previous sprint that aren't finished? You just simply move them to the next sprint. So in Jira, when you actually close a sprint, it's going to move all of your open tickets to the backlog, and then when you start a new sprint, you can select them and drag them back on. I think that's a really important concept because it's important that you only do one sprint at a time. When you have that sprint planning meeting with your team, you're making a commitment as a team to these are the tickets that we're going to get done this week. But that doesn't always happen. Magento releases security patches and ruins everyone's life. And things come up with company meetings or other things come up and tasks might take longer than needed. So it never ever really happens that all tickets are finished in one sprint. So a few words about estimates, because I feel like this is where developers get the most hung up on. And I think it's just important to know that estimates are educated guesses. And it's something that I know I've gotten really good at doing over time. I can do proposals for projects for clients in an hour. I can just quickly estimate with very little information based on other requirements that we've had. So it's important to estimate based on the information that you have at the time. So for our shoe customizer, we might just have that one line of information. Well, we have to make an educated guess until we get more information. And when we get more information and we fill out that ticket and those descriptions and we are able to do more research, we can refine our estimate. But it's important to always just take the educated guess. A few tips about Jira. I showed you how I created a workflow for tickets, so I encourage you to always create your own workflow. Also, with the board, you can configure your own board. You can easily just go in and configure what columns you want to see there. Use versions and epics, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And it's very important to log the worked time. So if we're going through all this trouble to estimate our tickets, we have to log the worked time so that we can see for each ticket the estimated time versus the work time. And we can learn how our estimating is doing. Are we under or are we over? And then also we can use that for reports. So for epics, I talked a little bit about the different color coding, and I wanted to show, I don't think you guys can see this too well, that you can filter on the side. So for each epic, you can see the total number of tickets, total number of hours, and you can filter the tickets by just clicking on those epics. Then you can also get a Burndown Report. So similar to the first Burndown Report I showed, this one is just for theming. So I can see that right now, for my theming, I still have 4 days to go. Maybe if I want to finish that in 2 days, I need to add another developer for my front-end developers. My back end, I might be at 2 days. So this way, I can do my resource planning a little bit better by using epics this way. The same thing with versioning. I think it's important, especially if you're in maintenance mode or you're developing a product with different releases, to use versioning. Even with the release of a website, there's always stuff that gets pushed from 1 to 1.0. And here, the bottom one is tagged for version 1.1, and then you can also filter on the side. This gives me a really great version report where I can go in and I can see what my estimated release date is. So again, everyone thinks that when you're doing Agile, you don't know when a product is going to end, but I think that's the opposite of the case if you're using it correctly and you're using the reports. I was talking a little bit about this upstairs earlier. How do you work in Agile with your actual development process that you're doing, and how does it work with Git? So the first process, these are the ticket statuses to do. When you select it to go into in progress, you're going to create a branch for your ticket. So in Git, you're going to create a branch labeled something like 10 shoe customizer, where 10 is my ticket number. I like to also use that ticket description so that if I'm looking at the branches and I just see 10, I don't know what that means. But if I see 10 shoe customizer, I know what that means. So you're going to put your ticket in progress, you're going to create a branch. Then when you're complete with your ticket, you're going to commit that and push it to your branch, and you're going to send a pull request to develop. The tech lead's going to review that pull request, and if they approve it, it'll go to test, and if they don't approve it, it'll go back to in progress. So Git and our Jira processes are very intertwined. We're at the test now, and if they pass the tests, the code is going to be deployed to dev, and the ticket status is going to be set to test. So if the ticket's passed, the test, they're going to be set to ready, and they're going to be ready for deployment. At that time, they can be merged to master, and when we're ready to deploy, we can create a tag in Git and deploy it to production. So this is what our whole process looks like, combining our Jira ticket statuses with our Git process. So let's talk a little bit about mistakes that you can make when you're trying to be Agile. One mistake I've seen too often is like people making one sprint and reusing it. And actually Assembla ships with this feature where they have like their first sprint is called the current sprint, and then they have a backlog. Well, there's many reasons why not to do that. And one is that you're not going to be able to use any of your reports. You're not going to be able to use your Burndown or Velocity reports. Another is that the whole point of having a sprint and having your sprint planning meeting is that you're making an agreement as a team to what you're going to complete that time period. So if you just keep reusing one sprint, it just doesn't make any sense. Don't skip out on estimating your tickets. I don't know, at least on our team, our developers never want to do that part. Don't use Jira just for ticketing. I've seen this used too often as well. Jira is a really powerful tool, and if you're just creating tickets and assigning them to your developers and then moving them through the process of to do, in progress, done, that's great, but you're not using a process. You're just using a ticketing system. And then finally, don't skip out on making tickets altogether. I've seen projects that use spreadsheets with multicolors and different tabs, and that was a nightmare. So it's, when you're in a sprint, if a bug comes up, make a new ticket. It's not that difficult. Some of the benefits of being Agile: you can always see the sprint status at a glance. And we saw that with the Lisa Scrum Board. You can easily determine when the product's going to be completed using the reports. And you have happy developers. When you have a well-defined process that works for your team, the process can let your team do the work. I know I didn't talk about Magento much in this presentation, but that's the hard part, right? Doing the actual Magento development is what your developers want to be working on. So allowing people to have a process that is fluid and easy and fast allows them to concentrate on doing the actual development. That's it. Thank you. Any questions? Probably can just go.
Hi.
Hi.
I've always found and learned that you shouldn't really make a direct translation of hours and the velocity of your story. In your presentation, I really got the impression that you do that. But I found in practice that if I were to say something takes half an hour and my story is dependent on a third party or another team inside a company, then I really can't say anything about time in the complexity of a story. Whereas if I say, well, it's probably going to take so much complexity because there are so many parties involved, or I'm not certain about the documentation of such and so, then I can make a better estimate of how I'm supposed to spend my time.
Are you talking about time, actual time spent, or duration?
I'm talking about the estimate of the duration of your story versus the complexity of your story.
Well, when I'm talking about hours, I'm talking about actual time, not duration. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, say it's an integration task, and it's going to take me a half hour, and then I have to wait 3 days for some other company to get back to me, and then it takes me another hour. My actual time spent on that task was only 1.5 hours.
Okay, fair enough. But you actually have a one-on-one translation of story points and time there, or?
We don't use story points. We only use hours.
Okay, no, okay, that's where I went wrong. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, okay. I've got 2 questions about you say that you should always close a sprint and start a new one, and if you've got anything left over, then you have to move to the new sprint. First question is, do you sort of treat that as a new ticket of not, like, let's say you've got a ticket that you initially estimated 2 days, you spent those 2 days and you realise it's going to take another, and then do you sort of treat it, do you just move that ticket to the next sprint, or do you create a new ticket for that to say you finish that off and that's 1 day?
You really just drag the ticket to the new sprint.
It's still a 3-day ticket of which you've done, let's say 2/3.
Yeah, if you're logging, so okay, say you're in sprint 1 and you're on ticket 10, and it's estimated at 3 days, and you logged 2 days already of work time.
I'm more thinking if it's taken longer than you initially expected.
So then when you drag it to the next sprint, you're going to have an estimated time left of a 1 day, but you can still log 2 days. You're going to go over your time, but it's really important that you keep all your ticket information together. And Jira is going to handle the reporting on the back end of making sure, like for your Burndown reports and whatnot, it's going to handle that on the back end for you. So it'll reflect it properly.
Okay. The second question is the reverse of that. If you've got a sprint that's say going to end on Friday and you're on Wednesday, and something's taking less time than you expected, you're not going to take tickets that you have assigned to the next sprint and put it into this sprint. What would you do during that time if you've run out of time, work to do in this sprint?
Go to the pub. No, I mean, I would take tickets out of the backlog, because remember, they're in a backlog. We're only doing 1 sprint at a time.
Yeah, so you're going to dynamically add a ticket to the current sprint.
Yeah, Jira yells at you, but I just ignore that. Because are we going to have developers sitting around doing nothing? Yeah, no, we just add more.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I mean about being agile. Like, Scrum is like very defined and very rigid, And that's why I think Agile is a better way to go, because you have to just do what works for you.
Yeah.
But you have to have a process.
Who does your estimations? Is it as a team or an individual, or what's the process?
So I do the estimations because I do the project proposals. So I'll start with I should say we all do them. But when I do a project proposal, I'll do the estimates. I try to get the developers involved if I need to. If there's something very techy or something I want to get them involved with, I will. But it's usually too difficult with them because it's so ambiguous at that stage. So I do the estimates, and we start with those estimates. And then as people choose their tasks, their tickets during the sprint planning, I say, what do you think about this estimate? Is this good? Do you want to change it? And then if they want to have time to research, well, I'm not really sure. Okay, so after the sprint planning meeting, take a little bit of time and look at it and get back to me and let me know if you want to change the estimate. It's totally fine. But I think I'm a unique person in that situation. Otherwise, I would say the tech lead. If you're on a bigger team, the tech lead should be doing the estimates. All right, thank you.